in the name of personal injury law.
Today we're going to talk about the realities of selecting a personal injury attorney. And I have with me our regular guest, Steve Sinas, and also what a thrill for me to introduce George Sinas. They're both of the Sinas Dramus law firm, very well-known personal injury law firm here in Lansing.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, so we're here to talk about this really important issue about the reality of selecting a personal injury attorney. And most people don't think they will ever be injured, but if they're injured, the question becomes, what should they be looking at and what should they be considering? So I'm really happy to have my father and partner George here. He's been a personal injury attorney for decades, to talk about all the unique aspects and the importance of deciding the right type of personal injury attorney to hire if you were ever injured.
Well, Steve, isn't it really just simple? Back in the day, we just look in the phone book. Today, we might Google or like whatever's on the 1-800 ad on TV. Don't we just call the number on the TV screen and that's how we pick our attorney?
Unfortunately, if you do it that way, you may be very much disappointed in the decision you make, or you might not get the right attorney for you and your family. So George is here, and I'd like to kind of turn it over to him to talk about aspects of this issue and give all his wisdom to us today.
Well, I don't know about wisdom, but Lisa, in answer to your question, yeah, you could do it that way. It depends on what your needs are and what your expectations are. But in the 38 plus years that I have been representing seriously injured people, I will tell you that when you get out of the hospital, the world looks totally different. You're dealing with significant medical issues. You're dealing with work disability and the concern about whether there's going to be any income flowing into your home. And you're dealing with the ever-increasing complexity of insurance companies. And I have come to believe that it's really important when you're about to make that transition from hospital back to the real world, you team up with a lawyer that can really help you through that process. Because there's a lot to do. There's not only the investigation that's required in these cases to determine how the accident happened, but there is an incredible amount of work that has to be done with the insurance companies, and this is particularly true if it's an auto accident injury, because Michigan has an auto no-fault law that just got much, much more complicated this last June when the legislature passed these amendments. And now it's not clear exactly what you need to do to make sure that your bills get paid, your wages get continued, and your legal rights are protected. So if you're dealing with auto injury, particularly in this era, you need first to find a lawyer that focuses his or her practice in that area of the law, because it really is a specialized area of expertise. And you need to have a lawyer or a relationship with a lawyer that will work with you in all of these various areas, not just say, I'll take your liability case and you're sort of on your own dealing with your insurance company. I think you really want to try to avoid that kind of a relationship, because you're going to find that it's not everything that you need and that needs to be addressed. And then the last thing I think that's important is don't select your lawyer based solely on a TV advertisement or a radio ad. Check them out. Talk to people that are knowledgeable about that area of the law. Talk to former judges. Talk to other attorneys. Talk to victims who have gone through the system. Really check it out. If you needed heart surgery, you wouldn't pick a heart surgeon based on a radio ad or a TV ad. You'd really want to know as much as you possibly could know about that particular physician. How do they work? What's their approach to my particular medical situation? And it's the same thing with law.
So would you suggest that the more serious the injury that has occurred, the more carefully the person should take their time in selecting the right attorney?
I think that's very true, because the more serious the injury is, the more treatment that's going to be needed, and that means there's going to be more interfacing with the insurance companies because you're going to be in the system longer. And this is especially a concern that I have with regard to some of these new changes in the law, which can really make things much more confusing than they need to be.
And I'll just add, we've talked about this issue before in other segments on this show, but in America, there's not anybody who's assigned to be your advocate if you've been injured, right? There's no natural advocate for you other than the attorney you select. And so you're selecting somebody who can provide you legal representation, but you're also selecting that person who's going to advocate for what is in your best interest and what your care needs are. And this idea that you can handle someone's personal injury case and not look at the big picture for them and figure out how can I best resolve this person's problem so that, you know, their health insurance, the things that George talked about, wage loss, and their pain and suffering claim. These are multiple different claims. Who can I select that's going to pull that big picture together for me? And who's going to care enough to pull that big picture together and not just try to make a fee off my case? It's the caring and the extra effort to make sure that the person's best interests are fully pursued that I think, and I've learned from my father and other people at the law firm, that that's the most essential part of being a good personal injury attorney, and that's what people really should be looking for.
So George, earlier you mentioned what a person's maybe going through when they leave the hospital, and that's when they start thinking about hiring an attorney. And maybe this is just on TV or in a Grisham novel, but aren't there some attorneys that might actually show up at a hospital and try to get a injured person signed up, or is that something that's not legal in Michigan?
Well, an attorney can come to the hospital if they're invited there by the victim or the victim's family. There isn't anything wrong with that, but it's certainly inappropriate for a lawyer just to show up uninvited and try to solicit a case. That's not appropriate, and you certainly don't, in my opinion, you don't want to be working with somebody that would do that.
And what can happen nowadays is that people will say they represent some organization that might be tied to some law firm or something like that, and they're really trying to say that they want you to go with their organization, and then they end up steering you towards an attorney. So people have to watch out, you know, what people are saying to them and why they're getting the recommendations they're getting. Well,
really the bottom line is if you're still in the hospital, you're not in a position to make a decision, an informed, well thought out decision, either by yourself or with the help of your family, right?
Sometimes that's true, but other times it's not true. And in fact, there are certain kinds of cases where if you do have the support of your family and if you do have the requisite clarity of mind, you do want to get a lawyer involved right away, because one of the things that we do is we thoroughly investigate the liability facts. And sometimes evidence has a way of kind of vanishing. And so it is important to get an early start in certain cases, but certainly nobody should be retaining a lawyer if they don't understand or their family doesn't understand what their legal rights are and what the situation basically is.
Great. Well, this has been extremely helpful. Thank you so much, Steve, and especially George, for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Law Firm. Go to WLAJ.com for more information on today's topics and to view other In the Name of the Law episodes.